Hi guys, the Tories despise the poor, and they'll use any excuse they can to punish those on benefits. It used to be the case that TV shows about so-called scroungers did it. Then it was the financial crash that came almost 2 decades ago, and the Conservatives used austerity to fix it, when in reality it just saw the rich get richer and the poor move into destitution. So as we're seeing a more polarised world where Donald Trump is abandoning Europe when it comes to its defence, we're hearing louder calls for countries like Britain to increase military spending. And the Tory narrative is, well, the welfare bill is too big, so it needs to be cut in order to cover the cost of defending the nation. Now that's just tripe, and I'll explain why in just a moment, but here Tory MP James Cartilage tried to sell another austerity story.
I just think there's a key point here, right? Actually, if you go right back to the Second World War, defence spending has been broadly decreasing ever since, obviously more sharply since the Cold War. And in that time, welfare spending has gone up. In many ways, we spent the peace dividend on welfare. We now have a situation where there's been this very sharp increase in people on disability benefit, for anxiety or whatever, many people of working age. And I'm afraid that can't go on as a country. We're going to have to be more resilient. So I think looking at welfare is not just about the savings, it's about our country getting onto a pro-growth footing.
But that is where you would look then. Disability benefits would be somewhere you'd be willing to pull back money to spend on defence instead.
So our Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride, as you know, was previously the DWP Secretary in charge of benefits. He set out a very clear plan, and we're not sure yet whether the government are going to follow that.
But that plan would not be enough cash in order to pay for the big extra lump of money that you're suggesting would be needed for defence. So just to be really clear, you're suggesting that you'd be willing to take a bigger axe to the welfare budget for people with mental health issues. You mentioned anxiety there, who might be claiming disability benefits in order to get money for defence. That's where you would
Just to be clear, Laura, I'm not saying the exact policy here and now, right? We will write our manifesto.
You're giving us a sense of
I'm
the
giving a
areas
sense
where you would look.
Of the fact that I think as a country, facing the threats that we do, we have got to be more resilient, and we've got to wise up to the fact that we cannot have a welfare budget that keeps ballooning whilst needing to increase spending on defence. It's quite clear, and I know that's a difficult thing to talk about, but we're going to have to get real about this.
What do you...
Isn't it amazing to hear a guy who's on probably close to £100,000 a year tell people who are on benefits, who are struggling to get by, who are probably working and relying on benefits at the same time because their salaries or their wages are not enough to allow them to live. A guy who's on almost £100,000 a year is telling these people, the most vulnerable in society, you need to be a bit more resilient. So I said at the beginning, this is a pile of tripe, and I'll explain why. France and the UK, very similar economies. France and the UK spend about the same of GDP on the military, on defence. Now, the UK spends a little bit more than France does, and this is a number that's going to change over the next number of years. But at the moment, the UK spends a little bit more than France does as a percentage of GDP. But when it comes to welfare, France spends a lot more per capita than the UK does. When it comes to healthcare, France spends more per capita, a lot more than the UK does. So how is it possible that you're saying what we need to do is we need to spend less on the NHS or on benefits in order to cover increased military spending? This doesn't make any sense. France is spending more on benefits, on healthcare, and it's spending about the same as the UK as a percentage of GDP. So how is that possible? Is this another Tory fib? Now, the European Union is talking about allowing member states, because of this new environment we're in, allowing member states to ignore certain rules when it comes to borrowing if it's about military spending. So the UK could do the same. They say, look, we need to balance the budget, if you want to say that, when it comes to certain aspects of the economy, but military spending can be excluded from that. So if the Chancellor wants to borrow a significant amount of money, if it's for the military, it's not covered under the normal budget. So then you don't have to go and start cutting the NHS or cutting benefits or cutting the DWP or whatever. See, the Tories don't care about the poorest in society. They actually hate the poorest in society, and they're looking for any opportunity they can to punch down, to make these people's lives much worse than it already is. Once again, a guy who's on almost £100,000 a year is telling the poorest in society, you need to buck up, son. You need to be a bit more resilient. You need to stop being depressed. You need to stop being anxious about things. Get into the workplace, make some money, and stop complaining. These people should be nowhere near the levers of power. Look at what they've done over the last 14 years. Running public services into the ground and, of course, blaming everyone else. And here they are again, trying to do the same thing. They didn't fund the military significantly. They didn't fund it enough when they were in power. And now they're saying, well, we need to increase spending, but we're going to have to take it from the poorest in society instead of those with the broadest shoulders. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.